This is Erica Lukes, and this is UFO Classified.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am, my skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course the tinfoil hat guy's going to see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So where are you going to go with this? Who are you giving all this to?
Oh, welcome to UFO Classified. I just love listening to that intro because it has special meaning for me, because each one of those little segments was taken from an interview that I did on UFO Classified. And you've got Tom Winterton from Skinwalker Ranch, and Dr. Eric Davis, and John Alexander, and Phil Leach, one of my favorite troublemakers here on UFO Classified. But I love that. So listen to it and then really think about the things I've talked about on past shows, and just kind of get a good chuckle, because I know I certainly do, especially when I hear that little lamb in the background. But you know how that goes. So anyway, I want to thank everybody from all over the world for tuning into the show. I get messages all the time, and the base seems to be growing. I am really excited. I just filmed a new TV show yesterday, and I've got another filming for an episode or show that I was on last year that will be coming up again. So lots of exciting times, and I look forward to continue to get the word out about factual information and to expose, unfortunately, the dark recesses of ufology so we can get to the truth. My guest this evening is a person that feels the very same way, and he's been through a lot, and we have got so much in common. He has been a source of support for me over the years, and we've had a few laughs together, which we'll talk about tonight. But I am so excited that finally, after years of asking him to come on my show, Lorin Cutts is here. Lorin became fascinated with UFOs and the paranormal after his first experience with anomalous aerial phenomena in 93, and then he began researching other people's UFO-related events in 95. He was a co-founder of a UFO and paranormal internet talk radio network in the USA. He became interested in sociological, cultural, and mythological implications of the UFO subject, which would seem to present. And I love that about you, Lorin. I just have to say you're such a cool guy. But anyway, I'll finish this. You've written for magazines in the US, the UK. You've presented the High Strangeness podcast on KGRA and iTunes. Lorin lives in the Pacific Northwest and is working on his first book. And he's also, if you have UFOs reframing the debate, then I've got this in my hand. I can't even read the cover of it. Dear Lord. Somebody lock me in the closet. Could you please assist me mentally tonight?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. You've been good that way for me over the years.
Right, we all have to support each other.
I know.
How's it going?
It's good. It's just another strange day and a really odd time that we're living in, and
isn't it crazy?
I know, and you've been close to the fires.
Yeah, although there's nothing. About a month ago we had a fire really close to here that affected some people I work with. But since then, all the fires have been, 30 or 50 miles away. But we've been really suffering with the smoke. And at one point where I live, had the highest reading in the US of the toxic smoke. And lucky me was out working in it. So,
wow.
Yeah. So it's just the way the cookie crumbles at times, I guess.
Well, I'm glad you're okay, though, because I've been thinking about you. And I mean, it's just there's such a devastating, catastrophic loss for so many people. And especially during this time with COVID and the political climate, it's definitely heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk a little bit about that if you want, because, I mean, I think that a lot of things are related, obviously. I think, you know, at the heart of many of those problems are, you know, disinformation, misinformation, and conspiracy theories. People not believing, you know, that things are a certain way, or like that COVID is real, or that climate change isn't real. And it's a real problem. That's something I've, you know, first started looking at in regards to UFO belief and the UFO subculture, but it's definitely a mainstream problem now, you know?
You know, it is, and it's fascinating to me because the more I'm sure like you, I've kind of dug into all of this, UFOs and the interesting people it seems to attract, the more you, I mean, the more I've...
So, like, we're getting, you know, interference already. Siri's like activating itself now. Let me just put that away.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
Tell her she needs to stick around because she's definitely not going to get it in an hour, I'm telling you.
Sorry.
Oh, my God, that was the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. Thank you. Oh, yeah, so anyway, I was just saying that I think the more I dig into the UFO world, the more I see how easy it is and how susceptible people are to believing things that are not in their best interest. I mean, it's just this group think, and we're going to follow the leader and you know, follow the red balloon and all of this stuff. And it's really led, I think in ufology especially, it really leads down a very, very dangerous path. And I want to go into that a little bit later in the show. Yeah. Because it's really, this is important, and I keep driving this home every show that I do, but I want to talk a little bit about, you know, you and your life and how you first decided that this was, I mean, you had your experience in 93, and if you'd care to share some of that with us, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, like I think I had a few weird things happen as a child, but I didn't have the classic kind of UFO experiences stuff. But I did in a roundabout way predict the death of my grandmother when I was about 5 or 6, and then my great grandmother as well. And how that looked like was I was going to stay with my grandmother every weekend, and so I was pretty close to her. And then one weekend, I just wouldn't let her go, and I was breaking down inconsolably, and I was saying, I'm never going to see you again. And then the following Thursday, she died. And so that sticks out, obviously, as a childhood memory that's a bit kind of something strange. And then the same happened with my great-grandmother who lived in Finland. And we were really close. I couldn't explain it because she didn't speak any English and I didn't speak any Finnish. But I did pretty much the same thing with her. And so when I look back, there was these anomalous kind of things, and maybe they're really common. Maybe a lot of people have those. And I think children especially, if anyone's got psychic ability, as a child, you're not kind of conditioned yet to put that in a box. And so those things happened. And the only other thing that was weird from my childhood I remember is having this recurring dream where I was awoken what felt like about an hour after I went to sleep. And I can't tell you what woke me up, but the presence was incredibly warm and sweet and nurturing. And I was taken to the top of my stairs, you know, at the landing, and I was taught to, this is going to sound absolutely insane, this is my memory of it, is I was taught to fly down the stairs with my mind. And you know, of course, I couldn't do this to begin with, and I must have been about 5 or 6 when I was having this stuff go on, maybe 4 or 5, I don't know. But this was a recurring thing, and it happened, I'm going to say, at least a dozen times until I got it, until I could fly down the stairs with my mind.
But you know what? That sounds, I mean, I've had dreams like that. I bet you that is more common than you think.
Yeah, well, I was like troubled that I was remembering this as it wasn't even like I'm remembering it as a dream. I'm remembering it almost as a real thing. Mm-hmm. So it had a different quality to normal dreams, even as a child, and certainly my memory. But I Googled this, you know, about 5 or 6 years ago, and there's lots and lots of people who have this dream. You know, so it makes you go, what's going on there? But you know, I'm not going to say it was like aliens or anything like that. It was just an anomalous experience that I have a memory of, and that was recurring. But I didn't see anything to do with UFOs. And the thing that that really changed my world was in July '93. I went on vacation to Portugal. Oh, that's my dog.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
You'll be hearing, my cat and the dogs later this evening. It's part of the charm.
I'll shut the window because he's hearing stuff outside. And actually, right before we did the interview, the owl turned up on the patch outside.
Why am I not surprised? I mean,
I know, right? And I was like, so everything's a little bit spooky. Eli, stop it. That's enough.
Hey, if I'm around, if I'm in your orbit, everything's spooky.
Quick, call Mike Clellan. There's an owl. So he won't mind me making that joke. But July '93, I was on vacation in Portugal, and I'm a bit of a train nerd, so I was traveling on trains for the whole week, and night trains. And I was on this move where I was getting a train. I was changing trains in the middle of the night at a very remote station, middle of kind of nowhere. And I had about 30 or 40 minutes to wait for the next train. So I fell asleep on a bench on the railway platform. There's no one else around. And this is like a kind of station that was like very, very quiet. I mean, there's a couple of shelters and that's it, So I wasn't in the shelter because it was a boiling hot night. And I remember hearing all the crickets and all the wildlife around. And then, so I was on one of the platform seats, but not in the shelter. And I don't know how long I'd been asleep, but I woke up with a burning sensation on my face. And my first thought was that I'd overslept and it was morning. And so I opened my eyes startled and became aware that there was a very, very bright light above me. And I could feel the heat on my arms and legs because I think I had shorts on. And, when you're waking up, it takes a few seconds for you to work out what's going on. And I think for a minute, I thought I was dreaming or it was morning. But then what had happened was I noticed that all the hair on my arms and my back and my neck was like completely raised up. And the other thing I noticed was, as I came to, was that I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear the wildlife that I'd gone to sleep with. So it was almost like I was in this vacuum or this bubble. I guess we call it the Oz factor or something in ufology, or that's what we used to call it. I'm not up on all the lingo these days. But so I had that experience. And just as I was really processing, what's next? Is this thing a UFO? Is this thing a spaceship? Is it going to take me? Am I in harm's way? Before I had any of that in my mind, this thing just shot off and did a right angle and shot off into the heavens. And at that point, that's when your mind is just, melting. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. That would do it.
And, I was pretty close to this thing. I'd say, I can't tell you exactly. I'd say between 300 and 500 feet, but I could feel the heat really strongly. And so the weird thing is I carried on my vacation, not really thinking much about it. And, which is unusual, but again, you read the mythology and the encounters of UFO reports, and that's not that unusual. But to anyone, in the outside world, it's really strange. So I got back to London, and I'm not even sure that I could even remember it that well right away. It wasn't like it was on my mind, but I think it was October, about 3 months later, where it was really troubling me. And then I was like, what the hell was that? And I became almost obsessed with UFOs. And I wouldn't say I didn't have any interest before this. I was kind of open to it. But, at that point, I became absolutely obsessed and read every book I could find. I lived right across the road from Imperial College Library. And what was really amazing to me was, and this was in London, what was amazing to me was that they actually had UFO books in the Imperial College Library, which is a science, science university. And they also had a subscription to Flying Saucer Review, which is this, incredibly stuffy old time UFO magazine.
But I love it.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. And so when I was taking stuff out from the library or photocopying them, I think they thought I was crazy because I'd go in there for 8 hours at a time photocopying everything. She said, "Oh, you're the UFO guy, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, you want me to let you in a secret? I was like, what's that? And she goes, people come in here and steal the flying saucer reviews.
Oh my gosh.
So that really piqued my interest, because it's like, well, how many other people are having experiences or this obsessed with it, And this was all pre-internet, obviously. I think I first went on the internet probably about a year after that. So, pre-internet, you don't really know, other than the few magazines you've got or what's in the mainstream media, you have no information about UFOs at all. And, you can read books, but they're not current. They're kind of, many of the books back then were about stuff in the 60s and 70s,
You're right.
So, yeah. That became a kind of lifelong obsession. And I didn't see anything else or have any weird experiences for quite a long time after that. It was a while, enough to kind of consume UFO literature and probably poison my mind. And I, for the first few years, I was all in with the extraterrestrial stuff. I was all in, X-Files started up. I was like all about that stuff. And, this is common, I think, with many people who are in this subject for a long period of time. Over the years you change, and it's interesting talking to people now who are just discovering the subject, because you kind of go, oh, I remember when I was like that, and it's a progression. I mean, the subject is so vast and mysterious. How can it not change you? The more information you consume, the more you read, the more you experience even. I feel like I'm in a completely different place to that person who had that first experience and spent several years reading those books. I almost believed every word, I think,
I know, and that's the thing. I mean, I was standing in my library today, and I'm sitting here looking at all these books from the, late 40s on up, and I'm just like, I mean, I almost wanted to say, why are you doing this to me? Get down on my knees and pray to, I don't know what, the mothership or something, because it's like, I remember being so like, I mean, everything was wondrous. Everything, there were all of these great possibilities, and I was onto something, and I mean, I could communicate with something, and I don't know. I mean, I guess, from where I was there, it's like I've just, completely done a 180, and it's been a hard transition, and that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna, once I get out of this phase of realizing all the really bad behavior, the corruption, the intelligence influence, and the people that are working behind the scenes to do some really nasty things. Once I can get over that, then I can go back to the beauty and the wonder of it. But it's like there's so many, like you say, there's just so many. It's a process that you go through, and it, from one moment to the next, like even, me waking up in the morning, I could feel one way, and then going to bed, I could feel another way. It's just, it's really a trippy ride.
It is. And, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I know that our paths are pretty similar, just from talking to you privately, but I've gone at one point I swung so far the other way, that pendulum, that people thought I was a skeptic and a non-believer. And that was never the case. I genuinely believe this is a real phenomenon, and there is truly anomalous human experiences behind this stuff, and that's related directly to UFOs and related phenomena. But I became so cynical, like you're saying, that it's almost like I didn't believe. My default was I don't believe anything that's in front of me right now. I need more than that. And of course, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some of it is going to be genuine, but much of it is not, So, it's a trip, isn't it? And now I feel like that I've come back a little bit more into the middle, and I'm a little less cynical than I was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But, we're also shaped by our negative experiences with the UFO subculture. That's huge.
Right.
So
it is. And I think that's the thing that, I mean, we've both talked about this. That's the thing that's so tragic in all of this, is all of us turn to that community because of our own personal experiences, and needing to find a community that can say, hey, you're okay. I mean, we're trying to do something positive together. And instead they go in and whether it's, and I think back at some of the conferences I've gone to where you're walking by rooms of people that are being hypnotized, and then you're going by a table of 10 people that have been abducted, and then you're going by, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is like, it's now I look back at that and I just say, what in the world is going on? Because I would honestly run far and fast from anybody that wanted to hypnotize me that had anything to do with UFOs. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating because I think what I ended up doing was, for a while, I just ended up studying the UFO subculture, because one of the few things you can study concretely. You can study the UFO belief for sure. And I know other people have done this, like, MJ Benias is on that, and to a certain extent, Diana Pasulka as well. But it is really interesting, especially, once you've been kind of privy to the middle of that, as I was with, KGRA when I worked there and co-founded that, just for a couple of years, and not maybe as a participant, but certainly as an observer. And, you really get a sense of what's going on. I mean, there's all kinds of cliquiness, there's all kinds of personality disorders. UFOs is a cookie subject, so it attracts some really cookie people, let's be frank. But on top of that, you've got attention seekers, people who want a career, people who want to make money, want to get on television. Then you've got the intelligence aspect, which might be very small, but there's still that element of disinformation, misinformation, for whatever reason. And I believe there's several reasons that aren't to do with covering up the real UFO phenomenon. There's another reason here and there for disinformation, but it still relates and affects the UFO community for sure. And then on top of that, I was thinking about this the other day. Out of all the people who've had genuine experiences, there's really not a lot of counseling or help. So how many of these people come to the UFO subculture that have PTSD or have psychological trauma? And that adds to the drama factor too, I think, So it's a real hodgepodge of, really crazy stuff that makes up the UFO subculture. And then you've got all the cliques, and all the very, very different beliefs, So...
It's like a nerd. It's like all the nerds got together who weren't popular in high school.
I've seen elements of that. Definitely.
I don't mean to be rude, because obviously I'm a nerd or I wouldn't be here. I'm a total, whatever. I am. I own that, and I love my nerd people. But it's just such a strange thing, and it's like, I don't know. I've never seen a subject where people just don't care about, they don't act ethically like they would if they were going to work. They don't have the same standards. It's like anything goes, because none of the leaders in the field have actually done a good job at leading and making the subject better.
Right, absolutely. And the reason I think for that is there's no UFO police. There's no, general accepted standards. And let's be honest, if you get caught faking or lying or predicting things that never come true, it doesn't really matter, because you've got a new influx of followers and believers anyway. And
I could say something, but I won't.
Oh, please do.
No.
As we're talking, so many names are coming up in my head too, So, but yeah, it's like when I was just leaving KGRA, someone sent me I think it was Jeff Ritzman sent me a Photoshop sheriff badge, and it said UFO police, because it was basically me and him were the bitter, naysayers who are trying to police it all, but really it's a completely thankless task because no one even cares, and as I've gone on, I've realized that that's not my job to really bother with that. People are going to believe what they're going to believe, and who am I to say they're wrong? Let's be honest. In the UFO subject, people are calling themselves UFO experts, but there really is very, very little information, real true information about what's going on. So that's why I came up with this concept of the mythological zone. In the absence of many real facts at all, people just mythologize. Right. And I think that's like 99% of the UFO community, to be honest. You know,
I would agree with you on that, and it's so hard because I mean, you and I, like we say, we had our personal experiences. We've been conditioned by Hollywood, by the media. I mean, I will never forget watching Close Encounters and watching E.T. and those things in my formative years, and that left a huge impact on me. And then you get more and more of the same type of thing, and it's just this kind of programming. And then you have a sighting, and there's so much out there. Of course, it's extraterrestrial, don't you know? And so that's where you go down. And if you don't know the subtle nuances of this community, quote unquote, whatever we want to call it, then you can get sucked up into these cults. And, that is the really scary thing. And now I look at some of the, like I mentioned, the conferences I've spoken at, and I look at some of the people that were there, and this was a cult. I mean, it's like they didn't care if there was, here are the facts. These are the facts. You can look at them. But nope, sorry, that is, that's you're giving disinformation. They like throw it back in your face. Like, I mean, which is just insane. It's like, oh, well, you're trying to stop disclosure.
Right.
Okay.
And there's another side to that as well. Like you talk about the craziness at UFO conferences. I've come across so many stories of really weird things happening at UFO conferences. But I almost am like led to think that, regardless of the trying to put, UFO disinformation out there, are they being used to test weird technology or, but do they use the UFO field as some kind of testing ground, which is like, let's face it, the general population. I mean, I've seen and heard so many weird things, and I've had weird experiences at UFO conferences.
I have too.
So, you have to, any rational person then would have to ask what's going on, And
I think that's important. And it's interesting because 5 years ago, I never would have thought, I would just say, okay, you're off your rocker. But having been what I've been through and knowing what I know now about, MK Ultra, about some of these different things where, you're going to find a group of people to test things on, what better place than the UFO community, where you've already got people that are susceptible to things, not everybody, but some people, and they're believing in all of these things that can't be proven. And so if they come out and say they've had something happen to them, that's an easy, okay, well, she's crazy. Look, she believes in UFOs and the tall Nordics and all that stuff. And so it's perfect. Yeah. It is perfect. And it is, I am alarmed.
And I think people are predisposed to go to a esoteric meaning for something that weird that happens, rather than something that would be technological or intelligence based, possibly as well.
Right.
So, wow, we've gone dark real quick, didn't we?
Well, we could. All right, let's get back to happy.
Because that's the thing about the UFO subject, right? It's so vast. There is really good stories. There's really positive stuff. But I think that the way it interfaces with the military and the intelligence stuff tends to be largely dark,
It does, and I think, and it's it's so hard because you and I have both had incredibly profound experiences. I think most of the people that are listening have had something that has happened in their life that is leading them to listen to this show right now and want to find the answers. And it is really, it's hard for all of us to, wade through this when you have all of this, crap. And it's not. I think that if I can do one thing on UFO Classified, it's give people information so they can see things clearly and they know where not to step.
Yeah. It's a minefield, that's for sure,
It is. And so, I mean, when you talk about, some of the disinfo, can you give us examples of what that would be with regard to UFOs?
Oh my God, I think it's so multifaceted and complex. And here's the thing, the way the UFO subculture works, the way the UFO community works, you really don't need many people to do this. You know? It
Clearly
can
not.
be seed every few years even. You know? I think that there's multiple reasons for UFO disinformation. As I already said, I think only maybe one of them is to do with covering up real UFO knowledge or information. I think that you've got UFO disinformation to protect military secret projects and pass them off as things related to UFOs, which is what we've already talked about. I think you've got UFO disinformation to possibly act as a psyop and instill fear in our enemies. I think you've got UFO disinformation to test dissemination of military secrets. And I think Jack Brewer's book talks a bit about that, and there's quite a bit of evidence to suggest that. You know, I think you've got UFO disinformation as a testbed to experiment new technology or intelligence operations. You've got it as a psychological or propaganda operation in conjunction with other belief seeding. That's when we're getting really big now. And now we're going to go really nuclear. Perhaps sometimes you've got UFO disinformation to establish new belief systems altogether, which could even lead to new religions, you know?
Yes.
So how deep is the rabbit hole? And then finally, I think you have UFO disinformation to throw off UFO researchers from getting too close to the real reasons of disinfo, all those ones that I've already mentioned, or getting too close as finally we get to getting too close to info about UFOs, you know? So I think that's the disinformation rabbit hole. It's very little to do with hiding truth about UFOs, and probably a lot more to do with all those other things.
And thank you. You put that so beautifully. That's exactly right. And I think those are it's so multi-layered. And people, you know, it's amazing because I've talked to a few people in the old guard, you know, over the years, and you know, I talked to them. Okay, do you think that this is going on now? Do you think the intelligence community is still involved in ufology? And you know, a couple of them didn't even believe it was in, you know, the intelligence community was involved back then. And I'm like, what? And it's just like, how could you not think, why did you think that was a thing of the 50s and 60s? And why would that not be a thing now when it is so much easier to manipulate the public?
And the technology is just, you know, who knows what we've got technology wise now. It's almost, sometimes I think it's impossible to imagine, you know. This has been a completely weird journey for me because I wanted to find answers like everyone else, I think, who gets into this. But where it led me, I never imagined it would lead me there in a million years. So first it led me to remote viewing, and then it led me into studying mind control. And, you know, most of the mind control literature we have is decades old. I mean, who knows what technology they have around that stuff now. But that's where it gets really fucking dark, because you realize that not only is that real, and innocent people have been tortured and given their lives and suffered terrific trauma to develop that stuff, but you know, it almost takes you to a place where you can't see any good in the world, and you have to get out of there. And that's really what I want to talk about QAnon so badly, because everything we're talking about, I think, relates to QAnon, and now you're beginning to see QAnon within a lot within the UFO subculture and UFO belief. And it's my opinion that QAnon is a political psyop. It's a political psychological operation, and there's some really weird connections to be made in the origins of QAnon and exactly where it came from that virtually no one's talking about. And you know, what I'll say is, when you start like meeting people, you know, from the military or intelligence community who have had anything to do with UFOs, quite often they're from a kind of this group of people who have their hand in a lot of weird stuff, and it always seems to be related to UFOs, remote viewing, and mind control.
Right.
It's almost like they're part of the same corridor in the Pentagon or something, right? Just to put an image in someone's mind. And so, you know, right away, to me, there's a link between all those things. And then you look at what people are experiencing, and there's possibly a link to all those things. You know, certainly one of the experiences I had, which was totally passed off as a UFO abduction in England with my then, fiance at the time. It involved a UFO, missing time, and then coming out of that, this awful smell in the nostrils. She had something up her nostril that was like metallic, like a metallic chip. But then after that, we started having. Well, I had a horrific nosebleed, very awful. It was on the train up to Scotland, and then started having all these weird synchronicities, and with her as well. And then we both were of the opinion, almost simultaneously, without talking to each other about it, that we should get out of the UFO business altogether and start going to church. So there's all this stuff that happened that was passed off, at least, initially as a UFO experience. Right. Like that's what you'd think it was. But the more that time went on, the more, and the rest of the stuff that started happening to me, like I'd meet people who were in the military or intelligence community, and they were almost like taking an interest in me. And I was like, there's something going on here. Like, why that wasn't what it was passed off at all. I'm almost convinced, having had genuine UFO experiences, my gut was screaming at me that this wasn't, and since then there's been a lot of what I call interference, and the most frustrating thing about it is you can't tell whether it's esoteric, whether it's some kind of technology, whether it's you're going crazy sometimes, Right. It affects communications via the computer. I've had so many weird things like that, and I just call it all interference now. I don't try and initially make a kind of judgment on any of it at all. Having said that, it kind of comes in waves and ebbs. And if I don't go to UFO conferences and I don't think about UFOs or write about them, it pretty much goes away. And isn't that weird?
Right.
So I don't have any answers. I just know that I sound like a crazy person.
No, you I mean, you don't, because the more I experience and the more I step back and I look at this from an aspect of researching it from outside of the UFO community, and I look at these people and I look at their connections and I look at what they've done historically, it's like, okay, wait a minute, this is... tell me this isn't happening when we developed this technology back in the 50s, and then you see some of the parallels between, now we've got our first abduction case. Right. Now we're bringing hypnosis into the field of ufology. Now we're now we see implants, or just all of these things, and I know that sounds crazy too and completely far-fetched, but when you look back, when I look back at things now, like I'm saying, researching it from a side that has nothing to do with UFOs, and I'm going, okay, we had this, we've experimented on, our own people, and so why wouldn't that continue? And I want to, it's just, it's a trip to me, and it's concerning, and I wish that, I don't know, I hope and pray that people who have had genuine experiences do not get sucked up in this, because I think it could be a very detrimental, a very dangerous thing to get sucked up into. Absolutely. And I think that the one thing, every time that anything like that's ever happened to me, I always question my sanity, because I think that's the logical thing to do, right? But a lot of these experiences have been involved, thank God they've involved someone else, or, at some point, several people. So with that experience that I'm talking about, which I definitely question whether that was a genuine, UFO experience, I told one UFO researcher, I gave them, a 3-hour account of everything I could remember, every detail. And, they went to the person I was with and did the same, and came back and said, it pretty much matches up word for word, and that makes me, that's the kind of validation. I don't know why after 28 years of this, I feel like I need validation at all, but it still bothers me that I do,
You know, there's still a part of me that wants, maybe I want to be crazy at this stage, you know. But, you know, so fast forward to now, my kind of reaction to all of this stuff, about 3 years ago, I literally thought I was losing my mind. And so I moved out into the middle of nowhere. What do? I end up moving to the middle of a UFO hotspot. You know,
At least you have got some good stories.
Well, I kind of think I wanted to prove to myself something. And so I live about 20 miles from Mount Adams. You know, ESETI's not that far away up the road. But I wanted to see what would happen, you know, because here I am with like 28 years of experiences, and I'm moving into I think what I was trying to do was, if you want to talk all spiritual and woo-woo all of a sudden, I think I was trying to see if I could get rid of fear, you know, and I think it's cost me in other areas, but I do think that I'm very, very less fearful now. You know, I live in a cabin in the woods in isolation for a year. I didn't even have a pet here. And, you know, I think that really subconsciously I was saying, okay, bring it on, motherfuckers, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had a few experiences here, but really I can't say I've had any negative experiences at all. And since I got out of the UFO circus, as I call it, my experiences have changed. So what does that say? You know?
Yeah.
It's, you know, maybe I don't know. There's like a dozen conclusions you might draw from that, but who knows what's really going on? I don't have any answers.
And so when you step back at it and you look at the mind control aspect of things, can you give everybody a little bit more information about what you discovered with regard to mind control moving into ufology?
Just that there, you know, once you start reading the literature, and before QAnon, you know, this literature was, you know, cult literature, and it's all got sucked up by QAnon now, which I'll talk about in a bit. But, you know, within the literature of, you know, MK Ultra documents that have been released, etc., there are references to victims of, you know, trial trauma, seeing greys, seeing beings, seeing UFOs. And in fact, one of the alters that is created from childhood trauma is predispositioned to see those kind of things, as well as other things too, like might be monsters, demons, other things. But it's definitely in there. And why would that be? You know. So the other big link is that once you get to learn a bit more about the origins of these programs and who's behind them, it's a lot of the same people who are interested in UFOs. You know. So there's another link. There's also, you know, off the top of my head, Jacques Vallée came out in one of his books, Forbidden Science, so he's talked about it before, about a case of abduction in South America, I think it was in Argentina, where he was pretty much convinced and was exposing that it was a military operation going under the guise of UFO abduction. So, you know, there's stuff out there. I'm not by any means the first person to say any of this at all. However, when I get onto QAnon, I'm going to be one of the first people to talk about mind control in regards to QAnon. That's for sure. So, and
that's an important thing. I've been kind of broaching that subject every week on my show, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised at how many people are on the Q train in the UFO world. And it's like, oh my gosh, here we've got this secret source that popped out of nowhere, and he is disclosing all of these secrets. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things again. It's like they can't look at facts.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's designed in a very, very clever way. So let's go there, shall we? Should we talk about...
let's go there. Oh, sure. Why not?
So now it's going to get really dark again. So in March, the best way I can frame this is a personal story. So in the summer, I was down the dog park here, and I met someone who was a lovely lady. She had a she was basically had the kind of vibe of an old hippie. And as we got to know each other, it became more and more obvious that she was a Q person. So I was like, I was aware of QAnon before this, but it made me really want to dig into this and look into it. And what was really fascinating about her was up to March, right before the quarantine, she was donating to Elizabeth Warren's campaign. And then something happened in March. She had some kind of awakening and a download at a kind of a local landmark here. I can talk about that aspect of it later. But basically overnight became a believer in QAnon and that Donald Trump was the savior of America and the planet from satanic baby-eating pedophiles. So, that has all kinds of mind control implications, just that there was a download at this specific location. And for the record, I've met several people who've had weird experiences at this location that all seem a little bit dark and weird. But so I start looking into QAnon, and I'm already aware of it, but not in any kind of great detail. And I start thinking about it over a couple of weeks, and I start thinking, well, hang on a minute. If people are being made to look at material that is incredibly dark as it gets, they're looking at, material relating to satanic ritualistic pedophilia, even if they're not seeing it, directly, they're being drawn towards that. And what that does is this is the mind control part. It creates a visceral reaction and it appeals to people's good nature. Anyone who gets sucked into that deeply enough will experience mild trauma themselves, but through that trauma, they get a visceral reaction, and very, very quickly emotions, thoughts, beliefs are formed. And once they're formed in that kind of visceral reaction like that, they're very difficult to deprogram. They're pretty much attached to that. And that is the mind control aspect of QAnon. And it's, in a way, it's like a miniature version of what was happening to children in MK Ultra and related programs, in that they're getting traumatized to create other things that are desirable. So, I put that together and I was like really not comfortable with that at all. I mean, it's very dark, but I do think it explains this kind of almost fever pitch kind of belief in all of this stuff. But here's the really clever thing. Then they attach all these other beliefs to it. They've already got them sucked in to save the children. We've got to save them from baby eating. And by the way, they're all Democrats, right? Or 99% of pedophiles.
Yes, I noticed that. It's interesting.
Yeah. And so they're sucked into that, but then they start adding other beliefs on. The other belief that the deep state is controlling everything, that Rothschilds might be, that might be true, but whatever. But the big one is that Donald Trump is the only savior and you must vote for Donald Trump. So it's actually absolutely genius. It's like mind control with bells and whistles attached. And I know there's going to be loads of people who are believing this in QAnon, just rejecting this and probably getting very angry, because that's also part of the programming. So here's the thing that's genius about it, right? When you actually look into the history of QAnon, there's been a lot of articles recently about how it came from 8chan, and a couple of people on 8chan were probably behind it. I'm not disputing that. Basically through 8chan and a couple of people called Ron and Jim Watkins, father and son in the Philippines, and they owned 2chan and bought 8chan from a guy called Frederick Brennan. And on 8chan was people almost in a role-playing game pretending to be intelligence officers. And it just so happened that the guy who was QAnon, there was lots of anons, but QAnon became prominent and then just went crazy. But at some point they changed the servers, and QAnon, therefore, before I think it could be a number of people who were QAnon. At that point, it could only be one person, because Jim Watkins knew basically the IP address of who it was. Let's go back to 1980. In 1980, there was a guy called Major General Paul Vallely, who commissioned and co-authored a document. Document was called From PSYOP to Mind War, and it was co-authored with a guy called Michael Aquino. And in that paper, it pretty much described what QAnon is in terms of psychological operations. And Michael Aquino was actually an expert in psychological operations. That was his job at the NSA.
And this is a name, and when you start really looking into the people that are affiliated with other people in ufology, Michael Aquino kind of comes up with John Alexander.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to go fast forward to the QAnon era. One of the most highly decorated and basically prominent people, obviously retired now, but to come out of the military or intelligence community, who was pushing QAnon, is Major General Paul Vallely. Now, this was mentioned in a recent article by Robert Guffey, who's done a lot of stuff about conspiracy. But what was astounding about his article was he didn't mention who Michael Aquino really is. And anyone who's kind of, been studying this stuff will know that Michael Aquino was a Satanist and was a pedophile. Now, I don't think he was ever charged with pedophilia, so I have to be careful with that. But his name appears on literally hundreds and hundreds of court cases about pedophilia. So here we end up in a place that is actually, when you look at what QAnon is, it's actually in the PSYOP to Mind War document, it talked about using satanic principles in psychological operations for mind war. And so here we go. One of those satanic principles is deflection. You basically mirror everything that's going on to the people you're mind fucking. So if you look at what QAnon is, it's supposedly revealing satanic pedophiles. It's supposedly revealing a deep state, and it's supposedly revealing mind control. Well, if you look at what I've just said, who's possibly behind it? At least one satanic pedophile. But these people, you could be called a deep state because it's one aspect of the intelligence community, and it's mind control. So there's the mirror right there. So, I'm not saying that I'm 100% right here, but look at the train here. Look at what's gone on. I know that I'm aware that it's really, really ridiculous to solve one conspiracy theory with an even bigger one. But the big difference between QAnon and what I'm saying is there's a paper trail here. You can't dispute that Major General Paul Vallely goes on Fox News and pushes Q. You can't dispute that he co-authored a PSYOP to Mind War document with Michael Aquino. I dare anyone to dispute that. These are facts. So what is QAnon? What exactly is QAnon? And here's the biggest tragedy in all this. Anyone who talks about satanic pedophiles or mind control now is seen as a whack job. Isn't that genius?
The whole thing is so genius. And when you look at the way everything is rolled out with the UFO community, that's genius as well. I mean, talk about, even though this is on a smaller scale compared to what is taking place globally now as thanks to this movement. But it's just like this, all of this just mind. It's just mind games. It's mind control. It's amazing. And people, as we've seen in the UFO community, just hang on to their beliefs and they can't look at facts, and they've been triggered by a trauma, as you mentioned, and all of these different things. And it's just, it's I don't know. I am amazed daily I get on my Facebook and I'm dealing with somebody who is talking about, an anti-mask and, yada, yada. All this stuff. And I'm just thinking, okay, seriously? I know so many people on the front lines who are risking their lives to protect your, dumbass while you're out there not wearing a mask because you think you're developing herd immunity when it's not the fact. That's garbage. And it's just like, it's so, I'm amazed. And even, when I went up to, and I've talked about this before in other shows, when I was at East City Ranch and I was talking, and there were some lovely people there. I had a great time. But there was one person who was really big and gets a ton of YouTube hits, and he was, doing his presentation, and, he got into the New Age, the wellness community, which we've heard QAnon was so good at, infiltrating the wellness community. And, he got in there and, this, love and light, and, you can't take this supplement, or you can't do this, and, blah, 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 blah. But hey, let's talk about Hitler, bum. And then they've got, the big swastika there. Everything else is in black and white. Then you've got the swastika. And stuff, because you remember after I saw that, I was so disturbed when I talked to you. Yeah. And it's just like, holy cow, if people can't step back and see that this is programming, I don't know what to say, but it's people have to wake up and say they whatever this is infiltrated this community, the New Age community, the UFO community, and now it has hit mainstream, and this is not, it's not good.
Right. Yeah, and ESET is a whole conundrum in itself. I mean, I've been there so many times, and it took me a long time to figure out what's really going on there, and that formed the basis of a lot of my thinking about the sociology of the UFO subculture, but also the social engineering aspects of the UFO subculture. But we've got to talk about this. So when my first weekend out here in the cabin happened to be the weekend you were speaking at ESETI.
Oh dear.
So that was the first time that was when we met. And can we tell that story?
No.
You can cut that out now. Leave them guessing.
And on that note, wow, okay. It is just so much fun talking to you. I knew it would be a lot of fun, and we're going to go out to break, and I'm playing a couple of Lorin's beautiful compositions. It is so much fun for me, even though we talk about a lot of dark stuff on the show, to showcase musicians who are involved in this ufology, whatever we want to call it. I don't know. The quest for, what do we want to call it?
The quest for truth.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll go with that one. But it is so much fun to hang out and to talk with all of these people they've been on the same path that all of us are on, and they have these beautiful talents, beautiful musical talents. I feel very lucky. I want to thank Mario for always moderating the chat room, and for Scott Brown from In the Field for doing beautiful graphics for me. And I also want to thank you to all the people that support the show. I take a lot of time out of my life, and I spend a lot of money going around the country and collecting archives that I'm getting out to the public. And so all of your donations are incredible. Thank you. I've got a brand new website out now, and so you can go to UFOclassified.com, but it should be up and running tonight. So check it out. Let me know what you think. And for people that support the show, I'll be giving different things for the levels of support. So I'll be sharing with you some interviews that I've done. I've got the Junior Hicks interview coming out, and then also different things in the Anne Druffel files and interviews from Norway and all over the world. It'll be really cool. So thanks for supporting the show. We're going to take a break, and you can listen to Lorin Cutts' beautiful music. So I'm going to play Riptide Rocket first, and then Solid Silver Boogie. So give us a little bit of info before we go to break about both of these songs.
Okay, so basically for the last couple of years, I've been doing library music, and Riptide Rocket is a track from a forthcoming album on EMI Production Music, which is it's all kind of punky car chase music for film and TV. So it was great fun to do, and it's I'm doing it with a guy who was in punk bands with when I was 16. So we just get to be big kids and have fun doing it. So hopefully it sounds fun. But yeah, so that's basically what I've been doing, and that's Riptide Rocket.
Sweet, and we're going to play that, and then I want to play Solid Silver Boogie too, because that song, I really like it too. So we're going to play those back to back. So we're going to take a break, listen to this killer music, and then we'll talk about the last song, the second song, when we get back. So stick around. We will be back. I love this. We're going to go into Solid Silver Boogie now, and then we will have Lorin talk about this song after this. Check it out. Love that. That just made me so happy. I don't even know. That's amazing. That's really cool. And so what were you playing on that?
I was playing the bass, keyboards. My partner was playing guitars. Actually, I think I play one guitar now, but we share it out. I'm not the best musician, but what my kind of talent is producing and mixing and writing. So I tend to get other musicians to play what I play badly. But that's kind of like, we tried to go for something that was like a cross between 80s Eurythmics and the Stones or something. So basically doing library music, which is basically music for TV, film, media, ads, games, anything, any application you can think of, really. It's kind of a different kind of beast. Quite often you'll have to arrange a song certainly differently because, you know, you've got to grab people right away because a load of TV producers or whoever are listening to hundreds of tracks every day. So it's almost like we've had to learn this craft over the last couple of years from scratch. And I think we're getting pretty good at it now. But it's also lacking vocals. You need to have space for people to put dialogue over most of the time. So the reason we chose to do a kind of Eurythmic Stones thing was when I first started working in recording studios in London in the 80s, the studio I worked at as a tape op, which is basically a T-boy and you get to learn along the way, was started by the Eurythmics. And so I got this kind of, I mean, I think I took it all for granted when I was, you know, in my 20s, but looking back, I had the most amazing, you know, experience and very lucky to have that kind of training. So in this studio work, I think they just got big and they'd gone to America, but they'd left like all these toys there. I mean, there was like one of the world's first drum machines, certainly in the cupboard from Connie Plank, who was the producer for Kraftwerk.
Oh.
And he had produced some of the Eurythmic stuff. So, like, you know, it was like a treasure trove. And we got to fool around with a lot of this stuff.
Oh
It's
my
like now musical history.
gosh.
Like the only regret I really have from that time is I was offered Dave Stewart's drum computer for £50, £50, and which he just left there.
No.
And I didn't have £50 to buy it. And it's the one that's in the Sweet Dreams video.
Are you kidding
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. And so,
Oh.
you know, I'm like, God, I wish I had that now, even just to have as a kind of ornament in my studio, you know.
Oh my gosh.
So that was the kind of, I think, why I wanted to pay homage to Eurythmics on that kind of be yourself tonight kind of vibe, and hopefully we captured that.
You did.
Yeah. So, you know, I like stuff. My heart is really, I mean, I like punk because that's where I came from. But I like to boogie and I like dance music as well, you know. So if you can cross the two, that's even better, you know.
I do too, and I mean, I just, you know, I'm a child of the '80s. I mean, Eurythmics and all of those bands were just, oh my gosh, I just In Excess. I mean, that's, you know, obviously not from your neck of the woods, but I mean, there were just so many wonderful bands. I look back and modern English. Okay, let's go down musical memory lane. but I mean, like Peter Gabriel. You know, I mean, Peter Gabriel was such a pioneer.
Yeah.
In all of that over there. And oh my gosh, who was I'm having a blank when I think about the person that was really doing a lot with synthesizers back in the day.
There was a few of them. I think the first band I was ever aware of using synthesizers was a Human League, and they were from Sheffield, and they were just up the road from where I'm from. I'm from Nottingham. And you know, then there was... suddenly there was like loads of bands playing synthesizers after that, you know. But yeah, I mean, what's really interesting moving to the States is that suddenly you become aware of all this music that never made it to England. That's really huge here, you know. I love that, and vice versa, you know. So modern English I'd never really heard of before I moved to the States.
Well, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, God, I love, that was such a fun time. I think in probably both of our lives, and in music, it was such a strange thing. It probably...
And you were a singer, weren't you?
Yeah, I sang for 25 years, and
wow,
that was fun. I definitely, in fact, I was running, I was booking at a club, and I brought in Dale Bosio from Missing Persons, and that was a big fun thing for me. I got to hang out with her backstage and blah blah blah, because we brought Missing Persons there. Nice. You know, so both Dale, and Terry were there and stuff, and that was really fun. So and then I got to open for Kevin Bacon's band. I don't know whatever that means, probably nothing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's been a fun thing, and I love my musical. I'm so grateful that I had all of those experiences. And
did you get stage fright?
You know what? I always had that bit of stage fright, and I think, you know, like my voice teacher used to tell me, if you ever lose that little edge, then get off the stage.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. I remember. This will like tie back nicely into mind control.
Sweet.
I remember doing a gig in Devon and in England, and this kind of brewery, and my bandmate's brother was kind of our minder and driver, because he was in the Marines and he was huge. And he was like, you know, it was 5 minutes before we went on stage and the place was getting pretty busy. And he goes, "You nervous?" And I'm like, "Yeah." You know, bearing in mind this guy's come from the Marines, you know, he's like tough as nails. And so I goes, "Yeah." And he already knew that I had a phobia with spiders, right? So I go to the bathroom, you know, 3 minutes before we're supposed to go on stage. And he comes up next to me and goes, "Still nervous?" I'm like, "Yeah." So when I finished, you know, I'm doing my business, he goes, "Hold out your hand." And I did. And he goes, "Now close your eyes." So I did, like an idiot. Oh. And he put the biggest spider in my hand. And of course, I freaked out, right? And so I was totally traumatized. And he goes, "Bet you don't have stage fright anymore."
Wow. Wow.
I didn't think about that, you know, so it was great. But yeah.
He should be a therapist.
Remember, innit? Like what comes up, you know?
Dang. I mean, and I love, I don't know, there's just something about it I definitely love and I miss creating music, which I'm still writing and doing different things, putzing around, but I don't know. It is interesting. But
I love anything creative. I like to write, and I love doing music. What I love about music is you're totally in the moment, and it's almost like meditation. And time goes really fast. I feel so lucky because I'm still getting to make music with my best mate, from back all those years ago, which is just a joy and a privilege,
That's so much fun. And I love, when I stopped, performing publicly and stuff, that's when I turned to my art and stuff, and I started painting, and clearly, obviously, I've got an obsession with clouds. What can I tell you? But, but it's like the same type of thing. It's just that meditative, like you're getting in your happy place and you're thinking about something other than ufology, even though we still end up going back there somehow.
Yeah, I mean, and also you have to. I mean, I see that in the UFO community, people who have made this a career, a career choice. It's very hard to retain balance if you're just surrounded by this all the time. I mean, and the other thing I'd say about that is the way that this subject works. I think it's, a slow burner, and things change, very, very slowly. And these people who've made a career out of it have got to keep creating content. And it's like, how do you even do that? There comes a point where, you've just got to repeat yourself time over, or make shit up, or, it's got to be exhausting,
Well, that's what a good plastic surgeon can do for you. But, so, yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about people who this is their income,
Yes, I am too. But yeah, I mean, I think that, that's the thing. And I wonder though, because, I look at, obviously my focus has been Skinwalker Ranch, and my focus has been digging into Bigelow. And I've, looked at Bigelow, and I've looked at the fact that he started this radio show, Area 2000, that was the kind of the precursor to Coast, another, whatever you want to call that. And so, he had, the usual characters, Knapp, Howe, Alexander, certain people on the show. And that was just kind of a warm up. But it, you look at the people over the decades that have been on that gravy train, and you look at the information that they're putting out, and you think, is there, that is, to me, that would be disinformation.
Right. And I think what's really interesting about you is like your Skinwalker's kind of become your baby for obvious reasons. And Yakima's become mine because I live here, and I think there's a lot of similarities between those two places. I do, I think, for many reasons. But, I would say that where I am, the area around Mount Adams, coupled with Yakima Indian Reservation and then the Hanford nuclear site, is probably one of the biggest UFO and paranormal window areas in America. And, Skinwalker is probably up there with them, you know what I mean? So I'm really out the loop because I haven't been focusing on UFOs for the last couple of years. So what's been going on? Because I know you've obviously got a lot of information about Skinwalker, and I'm going to turn the tables now and ask you a question.
Ooh, dun, dun, dun.
But catch me up with what's been going on, because I'm out the loop.
It's just been, I've been obviously researching this area and investigating and going up and doing video interviews with people for years. And it was interesting to me because I spent a great deal of time at Dr. Frank Salisbury's archives at the University of Utah, and to go through all of these, thousands of documents, and here he is working with NASA, here, this is taking place here, here's Jacques Vallée here, all of these people that are starting to figure into the narrative or organizations, and then you've got, Junior Hicks, who I became friends with and interviewed, and that was very interesting. And I think that there's always been a need to try to create a myth in that area. And I think there are a lot of different reasons why that would be. Probably because they're doing military testing in that area, probably because there are people who stand to make a lot of money, because they're involved in construction companies or the, oil business or different types of things, which they're selling property. And so the more I've looked into NIDS, the more I've looked into Bigelow, Bass, and the more information I've had about what Bigelow was doing during the Bass years, which he wasn't interested in studying the paranormal. What he was interested in is studying the responses of the people who were witness to whatever this was. And so, to me, that's a huge red flag. And then also the fact that these people at the ranch are getting MRIs, they have to take urine tests. Bigelow and his high-ups won't go on the property because they're afraid they're going to get cancer. You've got these specific things, and that's from multiple sources. And so basically what they did is they hired military vets to go up there and patrol and do, collect evidence or whatever. They primed them with here, read this Hunt for the Skinwalker book, and they, would go out there and no equipment, no cell service, which conveniently I might add, they say, oh, this is such a strange site, but we can't get cell service. Well, let's probably put that in perspective. It's probably because it's jammed, but anyway, whatever. And so, we've learned things after going through all these files. There's specific places on the ranch where the same types of things occur time after time, almost like clockwork, and people are not necessarily dealing with things mentally or physically the way they should. Now you've got this new series that has come out where you've got, the new person on the ranch whose scalp has been blown from his skull, or you've got, Travis Taylor who's got radiation burns on his eyelids. But hey, it's all, I don't know if it's just TV or if that's really happening, but there are lots of questions. And so in my mind now, looking at this, which, 5 years ago, 2 years ago was completely different. This is a psychological operation, and they are doing something under the sheets that is not good for the community.
So do you think that there's still a genuinely anomalous set of phenomena there, or do you think it's all psychological operations? I think it's been carefully crafted for decades. I think that there's paranormal phenomenon all around us. I don't have to go to, a 480 acre or whatever it is today ranch to have something unusual happen. And, my big thing is like, why in the world would anybody think that, oh my gosh, here you've got this little ranch and this is the only place where vortexes are opening up and shapeshifters are crawling out of holes and yada, yada, yada. I mean, it's like when you look at things, or let's talk about the Skinwalker lore where you've got, that's not even, where did this get inserted into the narrative and by whom? And then what happened after that? And I think you've got the same names coming up again and again. Exactly. And so it's just, and people get so excited. I did, Chris, my husband did. He lived there. He was primed for that, and so it's just really, it's quite interesting. But I think, where I'm standing today, what I'm looking at and the people involved, I don't feel that there's anything paranormal. And if there is, then show us. Give us the evidence. So, but you've had paranormal experiences there, haven't you? I had a really interesting experience right on the boundary, right after I'd interviewed Junior Hicks. And yeah, that was something it kind of knocked my socks off. And when I came back from that experience, I was on the couch for 4 days. I couldn't move. And the person I went with was the same way. It's like we were just drained of all energy, and it was... So you think that was technology? I do. That's really interesting, because that takes me back to originally I told you about the lady who I met, who's the QAnon believer, who 1 minute was donating to Elizabeth Warren's campaign, and the next minute was, QAnon and Trump, all in for Trump, could save the Save the Children, that site where she had the download, I already said that, I know several people have had weird experiences there. And, I went there with her about 3 to 4 days ago, and I came back completely zapped, and she had another download. So, I have to think, I don't know what I think, but is there some kind of technology going on there, and has that been tested at Skinwalker? Or, what technology is available that would give people downloads or give people what seem like anomalous experiences or missing time or whatever,
And I think when you look back at, I'm reading Poisoner in Chief right now about Sidney Gottlieb and,
right.
Jose Delgado. I mean, you've got all of these people that were experimenting with things way, way back when.
Yes.
And so, and with hypnosis and with this, just some really nasty stuff. I guess it's for the greater good of whatever, but
now it's being used against the population, in my estimation.
Right. And then you look at some of these things that are taking place, and I just have to say it's sad to me that I don't know what the people don't realize this, because there is something genuine and there is something very, very dark, and it is the most prevalent thing when you turn to ufology that is taking place. And let's talk a little bit about, To the Stars Academy.
Right. So, I've been very, very anti-TTSA from its inception, for a number of reasons. Some I can't go into, but the most I can say is that there's at least one person in that organization on the board, at the board level, who I know has been spreading disinformation regarding more remote viewing stuff. So would it then not follow that he would, this was years ago, I'm talking a long time ago, but it makes you question whether he would do the same for UFOs, and why would he not, and why would he stop? So, I have my own reasons to think that it's another psychological operation. I think it's designed to bring UFOs into the mainstream, which it already has. I think that it's possibly, the kind of thing that Paul Benevitz experienced and, Greg Bishop wrote about in Project Beta going mainstream. So, it's interesting, the parallels, because you could, if you went really paranoid, go, well, TTSA is like the coming out party of that kind of Benefits kind of thing, and QAnon is the coming out party for maybe the mind control thing. But, I'm aware that that's very fatal sounding. But, look at the times we're in. I really don't think that UFO disclosure, real UFO disclosure, is even a vague possibility, for a number of reasons. But, I can go into those. But
yes, I would love that, because I think this is a very, that's an important topic to broach, because that's all you hear. UFO disclosure, it's coming. And these are, anyway, the same types of people, I suppose. I don't know. But, And it's like my thought is, why would I need the government at this point to disclose that to me when I already know that there's something, odd happening around me? But
I did some work on this when TTSA first started, and Robbie Graham asked me to throw together a list of why I thought UFO disclosure was an absolute impossibility or virtual impossibility. And I've got that list here in front of me. And I still think it's as relevant today as it was then, This is relating to real UFO disclosure, not psyop disclosure, which I think what TTSA is. So it's a very big distinction. Real UFO disclosure is highly unlikely because of the following. One, what is in it for the military-industrial complex? Two, real disclosure would relate to classified information that is likely of huge defense significance. Why would the military-industrial complex want to suddenly disclose that to their enemies or anyone else? Three, how would it be affected? The current disclosure paradox is reliant on the POTUS being the top of the intelligence need-to-know tree. Others have stated there are many levels of top secret and above top secret classification above the POTUS. Whether you believe that or not, it's just out there. 4, what is there to disclose if there is little or no scientific proof? And I think that's huge. What if they are largely as in the dark as we are, i.e. large parts of the UFO military-industrial link has been a psyop, therefore real disclosure would deliver a largely bare cupboard. 5, it would require independent scientific verification. How would that even be achieved? How would they deliver disclosure if many of the answers are still unknown or unverifiable? 6, wait, isn't there somebody else or something else involved with disclosure? Yes, wouldn't it take the intelligences behind UFOs to disclose themselves or be a large part of this process? 7, given past record, why would we believe the government? That's especially relevant right now. The military-industrial complex or the intelligence community anyway? Answer, most of us wouldn't. 8, the current disclosure campaign is very clearly focused on the extraterrestrial hypothesis. What if UFOs are not ET? What if it's far more complex than just simply ET? 9, there's a lot here. The criminal and legal ramifications of the cover-up. Why would many essentially out themselves or their colleagues and consign them to prison? There is no historic precedent for this in CIA or intelligence community history. 10, it would further undermine trust in the power structure as they would have already been exposed or confessed as being totally unreliable or untrustworthy. 11, it might devalue further psychological operations and intelligence-sensitive subjects and operations. 12, certain technologies or research and development that might include huge financial advantages are potentially reliant on the continuation of the cover-up. Why make an unfair playing field fair? 13, the almost guaranteed political and societal upheaval would make real disclosure highly unattractive as a career move. Why risk a revolution? I think that's less likely now, having come, 3 years forward, because we're just literally swamped in information and the news cycle is so crazy. And finally, 14, if there are occult or esoteric links between UFOs and the power structure, why risk them becoming known?
Wow. I think you said everything that needs to be said about that. That's brilliant.
I've been thinking a lot about this stuff for years, and so it brings me back to the Skinwalker thing in a funny way. I was going to ask you what you think about the Skinwalker TV show that's just come out, because I don't watch any UFO TV at all because it just makes me so mad. So what do you think of the Skinwalker thing?
I think it's hard for me to watch because I really wanted something incredible, and I've always cared and supported about the people involved in it, and I was hoping that this would be a brand new thing that was away from the Bigelow, rhetoric, but clearly it isn't. It's just, again, spinning the same old narrative. So here we've got the cattle mutilation, and here we've got, the UFO, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's the same playbook, and it has always been the same playbook. When you go back and you look historically, it's like, it's just, at what point in time do we not wake up? And I think, I don't know. I'm disappointed. I'm angry because there are people like my husband who have been exposed to things, and people in the area. In fact, I want to just give a little shout out for my show next week, where we'll be having Michelle Sanborn on. Her grandfather was Charles Wynn, who lived on the periphery of the property and died of cancer after, we could make there's maybe not a correlation, but he was exposed to things, and he said they happened after Bigelow bought the property. So she'll be on, and so that should be a good show. But yeah, I don't know, Lorin. I think that is, when I look at the money involved, when I look at how much in Utah we love our aerospace and defense contractors, how we have a very nice society that doesn't ask a lot of questions when they should, perhaps. Yeah. And I think that this is just a place that is prime to have something happen that is not what it seems. And I mean, clearly nothing at Skinwalker Ranch is what it is portrayed to be. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Isn't that true for the whole UFO subject? Mm-hmm. So much of it is just this hall of mirrors and very little of it is actually what it is masquerading as. Even within genuine experiences, I feel that's true. I talk about, in my essay I did for the UFOs Reframing the Debate, I talk about the social engineering aspect of UFOs, and that even comes sometimes from the experiences, where you've got the trickster phenomenon and you've got the nonsense or high strangeness stuff. Sometimes I wonder if what the experiencer is witnessing and made to believe is actually a load of horse shit, So, but the reason I was, sorry to jump around, but the reason I was saying, that I was asking you what you thought about the Skinwalker TV show is that I watch so little media about UFOs at the moment, because I don't want to get sucked back in partly, but also it makes me so enraged some of the time. But I haven't seen any of the TTSA shows at all, so I can't really comment on that aspect of TTSA. I just can talk about the wider implications of what they're, pretending to do. And from the very get-go, I've been very, very dismissive of it, largely as well because there's been a lot of evidence that it's actually a disinformation campaign. Tom DeLonge's been posting stuff that was from sci-fi sets, and this is classic. It follows a pattern, right? It follows a pattern, like you said, that's been used down the ages.
And so, what other disinformation do you think that they put out there?
Oh my God! When I was, I had a blog, and I came out with several things. There was like I say, I'm really rusty, but there was the Spielberg TV set, which he passed off as a, kind of Area 51 type location, was actually a TV set.
Oh dear.
There was, what else was there? I can't remember. My mind's blank because I haven't been thinking about this.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. It's probably better that way, because the people that fall down that rabbit hole have gone off the cuckoo train. So
I know, and you can argue with them. It's like the QAnon thing. You can argue with the disclosure proponents till the cows come home, and nothing you say is going to change that, because so much of UFOs is like a religion. It's a belief, and you challenge people's beliefs, and you're met with a lot of resistance. I think there's a reason for that. The other thing I'll say about disclosure, which is funny to me, is that, Stephen Greer's definition of disclosure was pretty clear cut. It was the President of the United States appearing at a podium to announce the presence of extraterrestrials, and, not just now, but for decades. And as that doesn't happen, patently doesn't happen, they start moving the goalposts. So then you go from big D disclosure to little D disclosure, or the drip feed disclosure light. It's like, well, come on. Just because your shit hasn't happened, don't move the goalposts around. So that's what cracks me up. The original definition of disclosure, as far as I can divine, is very clear cut. And, so what TTSA are doing, that's not disclosure by any definition of the word. Releasing footage from, years ago that was already online is not disclosure. Okay, we've got a few more people coming forward. And I'm not saying it's all a load of shit. Maybe there's some value to some of that. But it has psychological operation written all over it to me.
Yes, it does. It does. And when you just think about it, it's like, why wouldn't people here want to put forward that we have got crashed saucers, that we are reverse engineering technology? It kind of just says, like, little honey trap here. Come on. It's I don't know. I'm kind of stupefied when I look back at the things I believed 5 years ago and now what I see. And it's crazy. And I want to say, too, when you look at some of the skeptics and you look at the fact that they're, I think they only look at like one case and then they, discredit a case, but they're not looking at the bigger pattern. Yeah,
exactly. And you talk about a bigger pattern. The modern UFO era is, 70 plus years. There's always been talk of disclosure, next year or soon. I was that guy in the 90s when I first really got into this subject. I ran around telling everybody by 2000 we'd have UFO disclosure. That's why I'm the way I am. You know, we've all been there. Right?
Good point. Yeah.
You know, and when it doesn't happen and you start looking back over the years and you read about this psychological operation and this one, and you realize this has been going on for a very long time. And then even before the modern UFO era, I think that you could argue that this subject goes back for centuries and centuries, probably to the beginning of man. And whatever is behind this, or this, you know, wealth of experience to the genuine phenomena, and I don't say phenomena, because I think it's a set of phenomena, has no real desire to reveal itself at all. You know, it operates in the shadows. Maybe it's better for that, you know?
I am thinking it is, because if whatever this was to, you know, come out and say hello at this current state, I don't think that would be a very good thing. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, it's also interesting. And when you look back at disclosure and when that word first appeared, like, do you remember a specific point in time?
I think it was the first time I experienced it was Stephen Greer.
Okay.
When I first got into UFOs, because I think it was around 89 that he started using that word. So it was on the internet for me, you know, probably about 94, 95, I think.
Interesting. And so when I look back at my teenage life, my formative years and different things, I mean, I remember looking at Bud Hopkins and Whitley Strieber and hearing about, you know, the abduction phenomenon, all these different things. I'm assuming we're pretty close in age, but do you remember, like, what were your thoughts on that when you first picked up those books?
I was mind blown, because I knew the thing was real, because I'd had my experience, and I was pretty open-minded to a whole other load of stuff because of my childhood experiences, you know. So I was open towards the fact there might be psychic phenomena, remote viewing. I went to my very first UFO conference I think it was 95, and it was the 40 End Times Unconvention in London.
Oh, how cool.
And you know, at that point, because there wasn't really widespread internet, so those things were huge. There was, like, you know, 500 people there or something. It was packed out, and it was so much fun because, you know, it felt like something was really happening. And but I remember seeing a whole host of speakers that weekend, and including Nick Pope was there, and that was when the first time I ever got my first experience of the UFO circus, because Nick was there with like 3 groupies. That's the green room, because my PR guy in music also did the PR for 40 End Times. So, you know, we had these VIP passes. But I saw Nick backstage with these 3 kind of groupies, and they were just having, you know, drinks and laughing. And I was like, oh my God, there's actually UFO groupies.
Yes, indeed. And there's something.
Yeah. And so, but yeah, I think that was probably Bud Hopkins spoke at that. And I don't know what went on, but his lecture was absolutely terrible. He was very, very unconfident. He was fluffing his words. He was shaking as he was turning the pages, and I've only ever seen him speak once, so I don't know if that was regular. I don't know if something had happened, but the result was it was quite unconvincing, you know. So I went away from that, you know, wondering what was going on there. And ironically, the best speaker I saw at that event was Philip Glass, you know, the skeptic.
Well,
He's out the park, yeah, and it was like, I mean, very, very tight, funny, good lecture. But I think, you know, before everything was so divisive, and you took sides, that was more acceptable. It was accommodated. I mean, you'd never get a skeptic speaking at a UFO conference these days, you know.
True.
Yeah. So the first time I ever heard about abduction, I think, was Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, and I remember being fascinated by it. And I think, you know, even to this day, he brings up some really amazing concepts in that book. I think it's interesting, the lineage of the grey from the cover of that, you know.
Oh yeah.
And I think maybe that says something of the phenomenon too. The fact that people then go around reporting things close to that cover image. I've often thought that this is an adaptive phenomenon in some way, and it adapts to where we are culturally in many ways, actually. So, that kind of abduction thing, I don't know if I think it's almost impossible to know. I've sometimes argued with people, especially in the hypnotherapy end of this, that how would you ever know what a screen memory is? The whole fucking experience is so bizarre from start to finish. The common thing for a screen memory is something like a giant rabbit in the road. Well, it's really a grey. Well, how the fuck do you know? Maybe they're experiencing a race of giant rabbit aliens. So I try to always be kind of play devil's advocate with a lot of things, and it gets me in a lot of trouble. It used to get me in a lot of trouble, but I'm always trying to look for different ways of thinking about things. And the reason I do that is I think that people are making a lot of assumptions all the time. And with abductions, I think it's very, very difficult to know what's really going on, because from people's experiences, I mean, mine included, the whole thing is like a dream state, or you don't remember, or you start remembering things years later, So how do you really piece together what's gone on there? I think from a psychological point of view, it's almost impossible. So I don't know if you're asking me this. I don't know if there are genuine abductions. I couldn't tell you one way or the other. I don't have a strong opinion either way.
Well, I think it is interesting that the abduction phenomena kind of was thrust into light when they were doing so many interesting things behind the scenes with, MK Ultra and things like that. And I'm looking right now at some of the surveys that abduction groups are, have put forward and things, and some of the questions on there.
Yeah.
I don't know. If I had a personal experience like that, I would never report that to an organization.
Well, and especially when there's been so much, malpractice, with the MUFON thing, the abductee kind of call list got sold. The information always ends up going back to Bigelow, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, well, what's the reason for that then?
And so what do you think about Bob Lazar? Just going to throw that out there.
I think it's a load of shit.
Okay. Thank you.
And I've got, multiple reasons for it's so bored. I'm so bored of that shit. You know what I mean? It's it's always the same people around it, isn't it?
Yes, it is the same people around
say
it.
The names, but it's the same people behind Skinwalker as well, right?
Well, when you start to look at the way they roll things out and hype a myth and all these different things, but it is amazing, and it's kind of sad to see all the new people that get into this that are just like, oh, look at this. This is
the Area 51 thing. I have a hard time thinking there was much going on there. I know there's been, sightings of stuff, and it could be military craft or whatever, but I've been to Area 51 a couple of times, one from the Rachel side and one from the Beatty side. And, I had a really interesting experience coming from the Beatty side. I think I told you about it on the phone when it happened. But a couple of years ago, I was going on a road trip with my musical partner, who's a total normie. He's never seen a UFO. It's not like he doesn't believe what I'm saying, but he's never had any experience of it. And so we went on this road trip, and he's like, take me to see UFOs, man. You've seen all these UFOs. You've had all these crazy experiences. Take me on a road trip where we're going to see them. So, we go through the desert, Nevada, Death Valley, and end up at Beatty, which is on the west side of Area 51. And we make a right off the main road, and head into the desert, And we're driving about half an hour. And we know that we're already in the military zone. It's actually not Area 51, but the kind of military demarcation zone. And we're about half an hour down this dirt track, and we're starting to feel a little bit like, what the hell are we doing? And we come across this dead cow in the road, and it's like newly dead. It's like freshly dead. It's not decomposed at all. looked like it had been killed in the last hour or so. I'm not a rancher, so I don't know, but it looked pretty fresh. So we were like, oh, that's interesting. It's a bit curious. It's a bit weird. So what do? We carry on driving.
Of course. Yep. Been there, done that.
About 10 minutes on, my friend is going, look, mate, I've got 2 beautiful kids at home in London. I've got a family. I don't really want any part of this. So I'm saying, well, we'll get to that ridge up there and we'll take some photographs and we'll say we've been here and then we'll turn back. So we get close to the ridge where we're going to take some photographs. And he's like, I'm not going any further. That's it. We've got to turn around. He's insisting. So we get out and we take a few photographs. And as we're taking photographs, the car alarm goes off. And I'm like, wait, way to go, mate. You've just totally blown our cover here. Way to be, stealthy. And he's like, dude, I never touched anything. And so I'm like, really? He goes, we had a hire car and the hire car remote was in his back pocket. And he goes, no, I'm pretty convinced I didn't set that alarm off. So we're like, take a few photographs. Let's get the hell out of here. As we get going towards the car locked.
That's a good feeling when you're running for your life there.
Oh my God. At that point, we're like, are we going to die out here? Because our water's in the car. We're in the middle of the fucking desert. I'm like, see if we can open it. So it opened first time. We get in and we just get the hell out of there as quick as we could. And all the way down to the main road, which is like 45 minutes down this dirt track, I'm like convinced that, aliens or something paranormal is messing with us. And it's only once I get back home to Oregon and I tell this story to a few people that other people said, oh, I had that happen to me, So I'm thinking, well, they obviously have drones or some kind of surveillance there and they just tap into the frequency of whatever your car remote's on. And it saves them sending anyone out miles to like say anything to you because who's not going to get out of there, So, yeah, I mean, Area 51, I think is...
That's a red herring. I mean...
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. And I think it's been going on elsewhere,
But again, you look at where... You look at the people who started the Area 51 myth, who are as closely aligned to this faction and yada, yada, yada. And so it's all a big, I don't know what, disinformation campaign, and the little small people come in and, think, I don't know whether they're fooled by this or they're, a part of it.
And if there was ever anything really interesting there, it was long after it became famous, long before it became famous, I think. I've been told by people I really trust who are in that field that somewhere closer to you is it, and also someplace in New Mexico, so yeah.
I would definitely say we got a lot going on in Utah, but yeah. But what that is, whether it's they're really reverse engineering a crash saucer, I don't know. I mean, I look back at, obviously, the extraterrestrial hypothesis made its debut with Kehoe and different things. And I was in California talking to Gordon Lohr, who was with NICAP and worked with all of those guys. And he was saying that Len Stringfield was a friend and went to school with Kehoe, and that, basically then you look at, okay, here we've got the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Oh, look, then over here we've got some guy talking about crushed discs who really can't verify any of it. Right. And then over here we've got, and so it's like, and all these people are, they've got ties with the intelligence community. Huh.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably extraterrestrials out there. I'm not, saying that's not true. But what that has to do with the UFO subject is tenuous at best, and that's not what the military-industrial complex want us to think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They want us to think that the two are absolutely lined up. And I've had, intelligence people tell me they've worked on stuff, and they've all kinds of stories, and of course that's something worth talking about too, because I think a lot of people in the UFO community have that experience. And at first you think you're really special. And at first it's like an ego thing. It's like, oh yeah, I'm the man. But really, I just think it's way more prevalent than people think. And, I see that from comments on Facebook and stuff. And it's like, really, it's just this kind of a moth to a candle thing, I think as well, it's like I've already said, some of it's to see how, information spreads and exactly how and who can be useful, So this is a way more complicated thing. And like you said earlier, there's way more to this than what's on the surface. We both sound like a couple of paranoid freaks, I'm sure. But,
no, we actually just know what we're talking about because we've seen it and we've been, and I mean, honestly, the people that should be sounding like paranoid freaks are the people that are believing that the freaking tall Nordics are coming down and they've got little gray aliens hiding under their bed. I mean, it's like, and that's the funny thing. It's like you talk about things you've got factual information for and you can back up, and yet you're the one being paranoid. Well, right. No. Yeah. Sorry. Let's go to a UFO conference, and these are the people that are telling me that I'm paranoid. Oh dear. Right.
Yeah, I know, and I do think there's a certain aspect to, I've had people tell me things that are so ridiculous, like UFOs run on compressed air. Oh. Things like that. It's like I mean, I don't even have words for that.
Okay, here's a good one. This is a good one. So with regard to the Skinwalker lore, there was a book written, and the person that wrote the book said that he'd interviewed several people that lived on the periphery of the property, and because of the UFO events that took place there was a higher number of a gay population.
Oh my God! Well, that's a whole other subject, isn't it? We could get into,
but
oh my God, the why are usually white people the people that get abducted?
Yes, I'm gonna have to have you back because I think there's so many things in regard to this. But I mean, we've got obviously to wrap up the show. But what is your advice for people getting into this subject?
Tread with caution. First thing I would do is go to UFO Watchdog website and see the sheer number of frauds and people who have, even people who are very prominent, who've been caught out lying, hoaxing, pushing folklore, and there's a lot of prominent names on there. And I wish I discovered that site, 20 years ago, if it wasn't around then, but something like that. Because I think then you can tread with caution and look at everything in a far more objective way. I think of course I'm going to say this. Go and read my essay, which is called "Almost Everything You Think You Know About Flying Saucers Is Wrong."
That's
in
excellent.
UFO Framing Debate. And I'm kind of poking fun a lot at the whole subculture, but the sentiment in it is real, and it's about. After 25 years of looking at this stuff, where my thoughts and beliefs are, and I think it's probably overly cynical a little bit, but that's where I was at the time when I wrote it. But I certainly think there's nothing wrong with that. It's better to be overly cynical than, overly a believer.
And that is true. And that I was rereading that today, and you mentioned Ann Druffel, and so another reason that we need to talk, and I need to get you back on the show because this is just all. I mean, getting those files has just been like, whoa.
Oh, we didn't even go there. Yeah,
I know. I know. Yeah, it's been very interesting, but I don't know. I mean, I try as I might to disengage from this subject. There's something about it that just pulls me in. It always has. And I think that you and I are both of the same mindset that people need to understand the pitfalls and the dangers of this and kind of, I mean, for me, I'm to the point where I would encourage people to, keep their thoughts private, to keep a journal, to not necessarily reach out to anybody, or definitely put your sightings online anywhere on social media or anything.
So that was what I was going to finish with. I've found in my experience, it's far better and far more interesting to stay in the shadows rather than be in the spotlight for a number of reasons. But But, I think also it's very difficult to be objective if you're part of the UFO circus. That's all I'll say,
Thank you. I love that. And I knew this was going to be so much fun. We're definitely going to have some people going tonight. But what else is new? I mean, it wouldn't be UFO Classified if we weren't doing that. And I'm grateful that you came on my show, because you don't do this very often. And so that's really cool.
No, it's been years, and I felt like I really wanted to, because I wanted to put that QAnon stuff out there, because people really need to be looking at that,
They absolutely do, and it's another cult, and it's affecting a lot of people, all of us actually. So
it's destroying families, is what it's doing.
It is. Yeah. It is. It's frightening. So thank you for calling that out, and thank you for just being very candid about your experiences and your journey through, ufology and your whatever you've been through. I love it though, and thank you for being my friend. First of all, you're awesome. And
thank you for having me on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can check out Lorin Cutts when you do your book. When you get done on your book, we'll bring you back.
Okay.
And have you on the show. But thank you so much for being here. And I want to just tell everybody out there listening, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for having a level head and understanding that what I'm trying to do, even though it's not all, rainbow, fluffy unicorns, carnival animals, whatever we're doing, that I'm here because I've been through this. I've lived it just like Lorin has. And there's so many things that we have seen behind the scenes that are not in our best interest to, we can't go there. We have to be open-minded, but we also have to be realistic and see that this subject is just ripe for the picking, and we don't want people to be hurt. I don't want you to be hurt. So thank you for listening to UFO Classified. You can go to ufoclassified.com to pledge your support to the show to help keep me on the air and to help me grow my audience. When we get the link for the show, if you can spread that out on your social media, that is totally groovy. Again, I would love that. Big shouts out and hugs to Mario and Scott, people that are working behind the scenes for the show, and all of my people that do support the show. I will be here next week. This is going to be about Skinwalker Ranch again, and this will be explosive. You take care. Stay out of trouble. I certainly won't, and we'll catch you next week.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course the tinfoil hat guy's going to see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
This is a
There's nothing like October at the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park, Baboon.
You said it, Lemur. The fresh air, the space to roam safely.
Plus, all October, all kids get in free.
Get Otter here. Kids are free all month long?
Yep, it's gonna be fantastic.
Totally awesome.
Ooh, it gets my seal of approval.
Such a
pleasant surprise.
I can hardly bear it.
Koala me crazy.
I'd be lying if I didn't.
Well, Owl be there all month.
Oh, you bet Giraffe will be there.
Okay, you win.
This October, kids are free at the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park. It'll be tons of fun. Presented by Mission Fed. And stay late for How Gloween. Friday through Sunday, the last 3 weekends of October. Visit sandiegozoo.org for details.